Welcome to the Reverie Nature Podcast. I'm Chad Clifford, your host, and today we continue in part 2, where we are connecting some dots between ultralight backpacking and bushcraft or survival skills. In part 1, we looked at ultralight backpacking and bushcraft and kind of touched on the definitions a little bit on what each mean and how they can help one another in getting your packs lighter and getting you out into the woods more. We left off talking about the big 4, and these 4 items are what you can do to really reduce the weight of your pack. It starts with your backpack itself, your tent, your sleeping bag, and your sleeping pad. In the Reverie Nature Podcast, you can expect to find a wide variety of topics on the nature experience, from bushcraft, survival skills, nature lore, animal tracks and sign, storytelling, nature soundscapes, and much more. These are the lessons and skills I've been teaching for decades. So before we dig in, please take a moment to subscribe and consider offering your support to the podcast. So let's move on now in our big 4. Let's talk about the tent briefly. You know, it's still hard to get much under 3 pounds unless you're going to pay big money for it, and I'm talking over $500 Canadian. If you want to get like under 1 pound tent, yeah, you're going to pay for it. When I look back to my tent that I bought in the 90s, it was a Meteorlight Sierra Design 2-person tent. It was considered a pretty nice light tent of the time, that is for sure. It rings in at 6 pounds. I have a very light 4-person tent, and you know, it's 9 pounds, but if you take that 9 pounds and divide it by 4, because there's 4 people sleeping in it, you know, now you're not talking too bad. 2+ pounds per person for that tent. That's not bad. It's not very durable either, this particular tent. But anyway, for a solo backpacking, a 6-pound tent, yikes. I'm trying to get my base, or my big 4, down to 10 pounds total, and a 6-pound tent is not the way to do it. And this technology, you know, a 90s tent, 1990s, that's not that old, right? Well, I guess we're getting on there now. but anyway, not suitable. And I'm not willing to pay like, you know, $600 for a 1-pound tent yet. So what can you do? Well, I decided to go with the tarp. I've done tarp camping before, and that can be very lightweight and very inexpensive too. So I have this rather large tarp. It's 10 by 12 approximately, which is pretty big, plenty big for us one person. And I can use my hiking poles for the poles, or I can use rope, light gauge rope or paracord for the tie downs for this. And I can get well under 3 pounds. I think about 2.5 pounds for a fairly large tarp, the poles and the pegs. So 2.5 pounds, now we're talking, right? And like I say, if you buy a modern tent averaging $400 or $500, it's hard to get under 3 pounds. So even with the fairly expensive ones, you really have to go all in if you want to buy a tent. And as far as I can tell, the main reason for a tent is the bugs, and if it's very windy. And if you need a freestanding tent, or a stronger tent in a exposed area where there's a lot of wind, it's hard to set up a good tarp system. Otherwise, to me, tents, they kind of take away from the experience. When I open my eyes at night, I want to see the woods, not the inside of my tent. However, if there's mosquitoes, you do need to do something, unless you're willing to put bug spray on at night, which isn't too pleasant. There are some very lightweight screens you can get to drape over you. I've tried very small screens that more or less just cover my upper body and head. The problem with those, I find, is the bugs just find a way in. I don't know how, because I've really tried to make it bug proof, but with these smaller setups, the mosquitoes are buzzing 3 or 4 inches away from your head, and it's hard to convince yourself that they're not inside the net, so it makes for kind of an uncomfortable sleep. However, you can make or even buy nets that hang off your guide poles for your tarp, where it kind of drapes down almost like a tent, not hugging your face so much, but more spread out over your whole sleeping bag. That's a good option if it's buggy out, and it'll add a little bit of weight, but you'll still be well under 3 pounds. Let's take another step forward. We're talking about our big four, or our base weight, and this is the way to keep your backpack light. We talked about our backpack getting close to 2 pounds, or ideally even under if you want to get into that ultralight world. Your tent, certainly you want that to be under 3 pounds. You'll certainly pay for it if you're trying to get much under 2. We talk about the tarps too, right? So that's another possibility that is really nice. If you haven't tried tarp camping, you gotta figure out a bomb-proof way with those mosquitoes though. The next of our big four, or base items, is our sleeping system, sleeping pad and sleeping bag. And there are sleeping bags called quilts now, where they get rid of the bottom part of the sleeping bag and it's more like a blanket over top of you. In colder environments, when you roll over, too much cold air can get in. So yeah, I don't know. It's about these quilts. Seems like a good idea. You get rid of some weight. Yeah, I don't know. I have sleeping bags that are pretty lightweight from my bicycle touring days, so I'm pretty set up for that. And it's not terribly expensive to get pretty light sleeping bags nowadays. You can go down or not. Of course, you know that down packs down into a smaller size and is lighter, but there are synthetic bags out there that are just great. In case you didn't know, if a bag is rated at, say, 0 degrees or freezing or -5, don't believe it. I don't think I've ever been in a bag or even clothing or footwear for that matter, where I've trusted the rating. If a bag says 0 degrees Celsius, I would say it's probably good to +9 degrees. I don't know how they do these ratings exactly, but I wouldn't say they're accurate. Yeah, I used a sleeping bag. It's a summer bag, and it's summer, and it's rated, I think, to about what was it, +3 or +4, and the temperature got down to +12. We're talking Celsius, and I had to be careful with it. It just barely kept me warm, and I'm not like a cold sleeper by any means. I'm quite comfortable with pretty lightweight stuff, but the ratings, yeah, don't trust them, or at least try it first. Don't rely on it if you're going on a long trip. Sleeping pad, though, the other part of your sleeping system, is a spot.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Calling all nature rebels and podcast aficionados, I hope you're enjoying today's podcast episode. Why not help ignite the flames of our wild community by leaving a rating and review right now? Your words are the sparks that fuel our journey. Likewise, share the Reverie Nature podcast across your social networks like the spreading branches of an ancient tree. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, in wildness is the preservation of the world. Now let's get back to the podcast. Or an item where people can really save a lot of weight. Is it worth it? A sleeping pad can be under a pound easily, especially if you go with the folding foam ones, the blue foam, or there's other like corrugated style foam things that insulate quite well. Comfort, I would say, is medium to low. And if you're laying on that sleeping pad for 6-8 hours, do you really want to sacrifice half a pound to go light, or do you want to have that little bit more comfort? A thicker sleeping bag is what I used recently. It does add a little bit of weight, so I added I don't know, it was a half pound of weight, I think it was, or maybe a little bit more over like a lightweight foam version. but this one was actually fine for winter, this pad. It's one of those ones where you have to add air. You inflate a secondary bag and you roll it up and pushes air into that, into your sleeping pad. Takes a while to set up, but it ends up being like 2.5 inches thick, and you don't have to be as picky with your campsites. And in public camping areas or these more popular trails, the campsites are often hard ground, overly compacted. There's roots and rocks, so if you have a very light system for your sleeping pad, you're probably going to be uncomfortable anyway, let alone any little rock or root that you're laying on. So this makes up a thicker sleeping pad. That little bit of extra weight makes up for a lot of poor campsite choices. It's fine to go out without a sleeping pad too. If you just got to be pretty choosy. You got to sleep on soft, loamy kind of soils or ground cover. That can be done and has been done, and yeah, you can get away with that unless there's coldness or moisture in the ground. People to go towards ultralight will even use a half or a three-quarter size pad where it's really just going from head to hips and leaving the legs on the ground. Those are all things to consider. I'm not quite there yet. If I'm going to do that, I'm just going to go full on, full on lightweight, not even bring a ground pad if I'm going to go that light. Because you certainly can if you're choosy about your sites. But if you're backpacking, making some miles on a trail, and you're going to, reserved campsites on the backpacking trail, yeah, those sorts of systems, it's going to be hard to be comfortable at night. So a sleeping pad, there's lots of lightweight, affordable pads out there to consider. And that's the big four. You know, from your base weight, if you want to cut weight down, these are 4 ways to do it. And I can't emphasize enough, as from what I've read and researched, you need that scale. If you want to just go through this exercise, backpackers or bushcrafters who want to get out more and go light, yeah, you need that scale. Get a little scale, those little handheld ones to measure the grams. And, saving 300 grams doesn't sound like much, or let's say a third of a pound doesn't sound like much. You add 6 or 7 of those items together, yeah, you're getting heavy fast. I'd like to now talk about another part of the backpack I like to bring. In fact, this is I won't call it a day pack, but my all-time pack. The lightweight pack I like to bring when I go out, even on short walks. When I'm canoeing or backpacking, if I leave my gear somewhere and go on a short hike, this is the small pack I bring. And this pack changes if I'm by myself or with someone else who has their own gear, or if I'm bringing my own family where I'm more responsible for everyone's safety. If you're leaving your main gear behind, you should have a small kit with you that will help you if you do get lost. And this ultralight backpacking fad and measuring everything in terms of grams, boy, I made all kinds of changes to some of the things I bring. Ordinarily, I would bring a full-size compass with a mirror. I would be tempted to bring a GPS, and I'd bring things like emergency tape, emergency mirror, all these things to really make sure that if I get lost, I'm getting out of there, right? And also some stuff to help with water, getting clean drinking water if I get stuck somehow for a couple of days. It's that little kit that has all my needs in it, but is small and light enough to bring every time. If it's a great big waist belt that weighs 4 pounds, I'm not going to bring it much. Not unless there's 4 or 5 people that I'm responsible for. I need something that's small and is fine. I'll put it on every time. I'll wear it all the time when I don't have my backpack on and I'm out venturing. So I really tore into this and I went super lightweight and I digged into the more modern gear that or things that are available. And boy, I got a 1 liter waist belt now. If you can't picture what a 1 liter hip belt looks like, it is small. It's about the smallest waist pouch or hip belt you can use. It's pretty much like almost what you'd see tourists wearing. A little clip-on belt with a small little bag that will hold a wallet and a few other items like sunscreen and this and that. Like that's how small we're talking. And that's perfect because I can wear that and not feel like it's an inconvenience. Therefore, I'll have it with me, right? And I won't go into too much detail on this, but I trimmed everything down in that. Before I might have had a metal cup that I could boil water in, but now I don't. I have 10 water tablets, aqua water, I think it's called, which weigh nothing. I have a 2-liter foldable or collapsible bag for water. It's like a canteen that folds up, almost no weight to it. The most bulky part of this thing is the cap, which is a small size cap. So now I can easily get 2 liters of water treated. I also have a small piece of foil, the foil to drape over you in case it rains or in case you need a bit of shelter at night. I have, I think, about 25 feet of a lightweight paracord or a 3 millimeter cord that will help fashion a shelter if I get stuck. Instead of having a flint and steel, I have a little container of weatherproof matches, really heavy duty, good ones, and that's it. I usually have a lighter in my pocket when I'm camping, but I don't put a flint and steel in this kit, and that goes against my bushcrafting habits here. Flint and steel is just too heavy for this little pack, and I really pared this down to just cover my needs. In other words, my temperature, shelter of some kind, and water, focusing on those two things. I didn't even put a small knife in this pack, and bushcrafters are just covering their mouths now thinking, oh my gosh, no knife? You got to be kidding. But I did cheat a bit. I do, when I go out, I keep the knife in these contexts, hanging off the belt. So yeah, in essence, I do bring a knife all the time. It's just not in that little pack. So I don't think I need to go too much more into these things, except use a scale. Bushcrafters or backpackers, use a scale. Get down that rabbit hole of the ultralight groups. Man, they're really shedding light on what materials are out there that make your trip more enjoyable as far as getting out more. Because if you have a heavy backpack, you're not going to get out as much. If you're going to go full on bushcrafting like I do sometimes, do you get out as much really? You need to have your lightweight setup too, because you're not always going to feel like doing the full on bushcraft where you got to make shelters and spend that extra time doing that. Sometimes it's just nice to have something light to get out there and to not be burdened with a heavy pack. One last, or maybe one or two more areas I'd like to cover is the stoves you bring. I had what was called a Whisperlight white fuel stove. In its day, it was as light as things were going, like very lightweight, great in the wintertime, that type of fuel to get, the propane's not so great in the winter usually. Lightweight and all this, and you can bring lots of fuel and be good to go. They're pretty robust stoves and they're pretty reliable nowadays. They're also a lot heavier. What the ultralight folks are using now are these tiny little propane stoves, so they have to bring the canister. That's the problem. But what they tend to do in their cooking system is not have a set of pots, right? There might be one cooking container, a liter maybe, or half a liter, just enough to get that dehydrated food in, hydrate, and then that's it. You're not boiling macaroni and cheese so much. It uses too much fuel. So that's another way you can really save weight is with your stove and propane canister, which is, a little wasteful, but it's great for ultralight. Bushcrafters, the ultralight folks aren't going to be carrying knives, or if they do, it's going to be like a super lightweight little Swiss Army knife kind of thing with a blade or two on it. I don't go that far, with all this ultralight gear. I still have to have my knife, my bushcraft knife. But even then, like most bushcrafters, I have an embarrassing amount of knives. I got a drawer full of them, and there's, I don't know, I can't even guess how many. Way over 15, I'll tell you that. Anyway, I even choose my knives carefully now. I don't bring my favorite knives. I do bring homemade knives, but it's the blank Mora blades you can buy, the Mora knife. You can get blanks with those and put your own handle on carefully. That's just, you got to really watch not cutting yourself when you're getting into knife making. But anyway, I have the longer Mora knife with I think it's almost like a 6-inch blade. It's a little bigger than what a lot of bushcrafters use, that 4-inch blade, but I like it for bushcraft, and battening down the stick through wood. So I have that, which is a very lightweight blade, of course. It's the number, I think it would be called the number 2. It's that wooden handle one, the typical Mora knife with the very thin blade. Great for carving softwoods and bushcraft. And the handle I put on it is a piece of maple, and there's not much wood to it. It's just enough to make a decent handle and be light. Some of my other knives were quite heavy in the handle and not suitable for backpacking. So you can have a very lightweight knife. The sheath I use, I don't use the plastic sheath. I never like plastic sheaths. The aesthetics of those is just, I'm a bushcrafter at heart. So, anyway, so I have to have one piece of equipment when I'm doing this ultralight stuff that really says bushcraft. That's just me. But the cool blade or the cool knife sheath I've made for my Mora knife, and with the wood handle, which I love, is a birch bark sheath in combination with leather. So I've made birch bark sheaths for my knives before, where I've had a birch bark loop that would go over my belt so I could hang my knife. Most people who do birch bark sheaths for knives don't have a loop on them. They just store the knife somewhere. What I did this time, I think I just invented something, actually, a new type of knife sling or sheath, was that I made the birch bark, a slim little birch bark case just for the blade of my knife, very lightweight. And what I did was I fashioned a piece of leather into a belt loop that just goes over that piece of birch bark sheath. And it makes for a very aesthetically pleasing setup that's super duper lightweight. So I have my Mora knife in a traditional sheath, lots of good vibes there, and a great bushcraft knife. Also very lightweight. It doesn't fit into my tiny little 1 liter hip pack, but I do hang it off my belt or that pack's belt if need be. Anyway, I'm getting a little long in the tooth here, but I just wanted to emphasize to my bushcraft friends how to go a little lighter, get out there more. If you're like me and you have gear that, the old-fashioned gear or the stuff from the 80s and 90s and before, it lasts almost a lifetime. So you don't need to buy new gear. However, if you want to go ultralight and get some of that weight off your pack, it might be time to upgrade or reconsider things a bit to make this really lightweight. Make your gear lightweight. There is one downside that I haven't really focused on though, about the lightweight gear, especially the ultralight stuff that you really pay for. I don't think it's quite as durable. I've heard a few comments about how careful you have to be with this material. Is it worth it to go ultralight and have gear that probably isn't going to last more than 5 years? I don't know. Probably not. Not if you're soaking in that much money, unless you are what they call a through hiker, where you're hiking hundreds or thousands of miles in a year, and you're putting on so much mileage that it's worth it to you because you're investing into months of experience here. Versus what most people do is go on a few trips a year and have that gear last 4 years. 4 is the number 4, but for many years, I should have said. So to sum up, bushcrafters, get out the scale, get some lightweight gear. Ultralight hikers, learn some bushcraft, learn some of the aesthetics of the woods, and as any bushcrafter will tell you, it's these kind of skills that really add to the experience. So have some of these skills in your back pocket, get out there, be lightweight, be safe. Thank you for joining us on the Reverie Nature Podcast. Remember to subscribe for more captivating episodes exploring the wonders of the natural world. Until next time, may you saunter forth, embracing nature's song, and may the whispers of the wilderness linger in your heart.
And floating above the forest where a canopy has turned upside down, where trembling aspen leaves are gone.